this is Will Your Werewolf, and this is me continuing with my stories. If you could, please like and subscribe. This is getting back to vampire nonsense. Happened just recently. If you haven't listened to the first vampire video that I made, then I'll put one of those cardy things in the top of the screen on the right. Go and listen to that first. This will make a little bit more sense then. If not, good luck with it. Like, subscribe, please ding the bell and comment for good or for not. It's up to you. Okay, let's continue with the story. More vampire nonsense. So you make one teeny tiny terrible mistake and the whole world collapses in on you. You kill the wrong vampire and then all these pointy-toothed weird goth bastards start hunting you for some strange teach the werewolf for lesson reason. I mean, it was a case of him or me, and I had won out of sheer undignified luck. I hate the saying you create your own luck, because I feel if the police had not luckily turned up when I had ripped off the head of the one vampire, I would be a dead thing myself. The problem with killing said vampire was that I'd left his sister alive. She had witnessed said killing and she was a little pissed off about it. Well, more than pissed. Perturbed maybe. I had now gotten back to England after my Far East tour. I'm not sure if that's the correct terminology. Is that a bit racist? I'm talking about Japan and those places, but it seems to fit. It was not meant in any racist way. It was, if it was taken that way, then that was on you. It's about as far east as I can manage without coming back to west again. So that's why I'm calling it that. In Japan, unfortunately, I'd fallen out with a vampire bitch. Well, less of the fallen out with. I'd murdered her brother. Well, murdered is probably not the right word for it. Murder implies killing without a justified reason, and he was trying to kill me, so I may for once have been justified in the killing that I did. So the manslaughter? No, that's the wrong word, because he was no longer a human. Well, a human but an undead one, so where he was undead. Does that mean he was dead? So I couldn't kill him because he was dead already? So I really could not have killed him, so I did not commit any crime. Oh, fuck knows. I stopped a vampire by removing its head, which meant that it no longer was a vampire. There you go. It was no longer undead, dead, vampire thing. This is so confusing. I was a bit annoyed at the results of pulling his head off, though. You know, that the body did not burn up once it was dead, like in the films, like Blurred, you know. No, it just lay there and it was all bloody and dead red. It was simple. I had pissed off the female vampire person. Well, I think she was female. It's hard to tell with the Vampire Nation. They've all become androgynous pretty things, whatever their sex, and have taken the Anne Rice books pretty literally. I mean, sex and gender do not bother me, but I would not know without given pronouns. I mean, what happened to the Nosferatu-looking motherfuckers, you know, all weird and unattractive with monster-like features? Oh, now vampires are all possess this glamour that makes us look such a sexy thing from a 90s Marilyn Manson video. What was it? It was a cover of Tainted Love or something, that all the sexy goths turned up at a party and joined in with the normal kids. Weirdly, it's okay that a middle-aged Marilyn Manson and his crew are at this youngster's party. I mean, to be honest, not knocking you, Marilyn, you're a bit of a creepy sort of fuck at the best of times, but this makes him even more creepy than Mr. Creepy from Creepyland on a particularly creepy day of the week. Creepy, huh? Why do I get sidetracked all the time? I had killed her brother after they had threatened to kill me. I had done the thing of letting the baddie do the threatening and shit-talking while I got myself into a position where I could nail one of the bastards first. I was brought up with a posit, that's my wolf soul, who always told me I should retaliate first, so I took his lead and killed the skinny fop. They apparently were going to hunt and kill me, so it only seemed fair that I did it before them. Apparently, I was better sport than the human prey that they were used to. As she had blah-de-blah'd, I managed to transform and grab him. If they'd shut up and attacked me, they would have won very easily, but nah, they had to push it and give me a chance. They should have watched a few more Bond movies instead of reading Anne Rice books. Baddies should never gloat before the kill. It lets the goodies win. In this case, for some reason, I class myself as a goodie. I have to admit, though, I was really glad that they had not gone down the road of being sparkly misunderstood beasties. Lovelorn and forever teenagers. Have I mentioned how much I hate Twilight? I probably have in one or two of these things. How have we gone from Salem's Lot and Nosferatu to feckin' Edward and the Sparkly Bunny? Jesus, could you imagine the self-hate I would have if I had a sparkly vampire who'd killed me? Thank goodness that there is no afterlife or any crap vampires. I could put up with the androgynous evil gets because, well, it's kind of sexy as fuck. I mean, the two that came to kill me look like something cross between the elves from Lord of the Rings and a BDSM catalogue. A nice fusion. Oh, and that video in the 90s I talked about, the Marilyn one, has meant that I have a thing for goths now. I mean, a real thing. You may ask where I'm going with all this, and the answer is I really do not know, but let me try and get back to the story. I had removed a vampire from the world, and his sister was annoyed at me for it. Sorry about that. That was 800 words of complete waffle before that. Hopefully at this point you realise I'm being hunted by a furious vampire because I took her brother from her and she's very good looking. I was walking down Ye Olde Canal Street in Manchester after a day at the races. I was on my way home and thought that I would take a wee wander along the fabled Canal Street to see what the night would bring. If you've never heard of Canal Street in Manchester, I could probably give you a simple clue that will allow you to work out the nature of that Heaven's Road. The sign on the bridge was in a constant state of being replaced and then being re-graffitied. Every time the Canal Street sign went up, it was spell-checked to remove the C and the S from the beginning of each word. Can you work out what he says? Yep. Anal treat. I hope that gives you the nature of the road that I was now wandering along. Outside the bordellos were a host of the alphabet community doing their thing that they are renowned for. That, of course, is partying. I always wondered what the quiet introverts of this community do. I mean, it seems to be a thing that if you are other, I mean the LBGTQA+, you have the need to party all the time. Me personally being greedy, I think it is more amenably called bisexual, pansexual, or omnisexual. I'm not particularly eager to party all the time. Sometimes my favourite sound is the freshly brewed coffee entering the warm cup. So I have to wonder if I'm actually a member of this mad community, bi or whatever, or am I just greedy? I see sex as all the same game. The only changes are the controls changing from joysticks to touch buttons, and there are many more ways to load up the game than that. Getting back to the story again, I was walking down Treat Street, to see if anything fun was happening. I would see 100 people's nights unfold before me as I walked, and there was always a chance that I could get involved in and ruin one of those nights thoroughly. I'd just been distracted by a young couple, a twink and a bear, wandering hand in hand down the main pavement. The bear was a giant hairy monster of a man. I mean, out of this context, he looked somewhat like the most heterosexual man that you can imagine. He had a big beard and a moustache. I mean, the moustache was shaped carefully and he had no neck beard, so you could see he was a Care Bear. He wore denim shorts and a red and black plaid shirt tied where, if he had not been having a vast belly where his hips would have been, it exposed his tummy to the July evening's warm air and was not something that I would hope to have displayed in front of me, really. His partner was a bleach blonde-haired skinny camp boy. He wore a vest much too big for himself and a shiny silver waistcoat, and he skipped along after his bear, chattering away into the night. I watched him pass, smiling from ear to ear. It's the most entertaining street in Manchester. I could go into more detail, but I haven't got time. Just pop down and join the party. Distracted by these two, I did not notice her in the shadows of the Velvet Hotel doorway. As I walked past, she stepped out and linked my arm. I did not react in surprise or fear. I didn't even flinch. I mean, I was a little surprised that she stepped out of nowhere to be there, but I knew she would catch up with me at some point. She held a stiletto dagger that she pricked through my very expensive Boglioli jacket. That's Italian, I'm going to say it like that, I'm from Manchester. I hope that she realised that she was ruining a beautiful thing that had taken a lot of effort to create and much more money to buy. The bitch. If she stuck the knife into me, it would pierce my liver and be very painful, but the tearing of my jacket hurt me much more mentally. At this point, I wanted to kill her, but it would be interesting to see where this was going. I knew she was going to have to tell me that, what was going to happen to me in great detail. It had been a failing in our last meeting that had cost her the price of her, dead brother. I could have killed her right now if I had the mind. Retaliate first was still in my meditative mantra, and to be honest, I really should have killed her at this point to make my life easier, because I like my life to be interesting, but this was going to be interesting and annoying, not a great mixture for an evening. You do realise you are going to die for what you have done, do you not? She whispered in my ear. I looked up from the dagger and the hole in my suit. Do you realise you deserve to die for what you've done? I said, pointing at the hole that she had created in my jacket. She looked at the hole and laughed. It is material and of no consequence, she said. I could have ripped her throat out of her pretty little neck for this level of understatement. The utter bitch! Could she not see the tear in my eye? You killed my brother, and for this you must die. She tried to say it in a really frightening way, and I pointed at the jacket. Well, in my eyes we're even then. Look what you did to my beautiful... Silence! She whisper-shouted. Yeah, I know whisper-shouted doesn't sound like a thing, but I'm sure you know what I mean. I did not go into silence, but I continued my sentences just under the volume she could make sense of. If I had been a 14-year-old girl, it would have been the equivalent of that mumbled response they give when when they're upset with you. I mean, she didn't realise my upset. My brother. He was my only care, my only love. What? You mean like, did you two, is that not like incest and shit? Now, I only said this to upset her. I mean, upset her more. I don't understand why I do it at times. Why do I have to stir the pot further? Had I not done enough in killing her brother? Did I not have to take it further by suggesting that she'd fucked him? We need to keep the bloodline pure, she replied. Which in my eyes meant that she'd actually have fucked him. But I would not explore this any further, because if she did, then there wasn't a point rubbing it in if it didn't annoy her. I also was a little shocked that she'd said that, to be honest. Maybe she was joking. No, she wasn't joking, was she? She can't be joking. I was not sure to go with it, to be honest. I was also still a bit upset about the hole in my jacket. We walked a little further until I unlinked my arm in a particularly busy part of the street amongst the drunk, stoned and drugged as they danced around in joy. Look... Sorry, what are you going to do? Can you do it, please? Because I need to get home and repair this thing, I asked her. You want me to do this here and now? Well, it would seem that the quicker the better. I just do not want to waste any more time, to be honest. We can just get this out of the way. What on earth are you waiting for? Do not draw it out. Two more of the things stepped out of the dark. They had to be vampires because they were, well... so cool. It looked like something had dragged them out of a Matrix film. All black, long leather, latex and sunglasses at midnight. Two male-ish creatures were very androgynous and emitting very dangerous vibes that even I could sense. She nodded to something behind me. I turned around and saw two female-ish creatures. Again, Matrix Evers extras, sort of covered in a leather, latex and more latex. She smiled at them and then turned back to me. They fitted into this environment pretty well. They stood at four corners of a square looking in. Then I noticed four more behind them and four more behind them. Shit, I was going to die. They all looked at me and were the only still individuals on the road of milling people. All were posing in the same manner, hands palm on palm, held in front of them like an inverted prayer. I think the best thing for you, Wolf, is to come with us and not cause any embarrassing scenes, she told me. She had no idea that was one of the things I lived for. In my head, I heard Fenn start to yell his protests at the situation. He told me to kill, murder and destroy those in front of me. He was upset at this treatment, and some of the language he was using was fairly choice, to say the most. I tried to calm him in my head, telling him that he would deal with this situation in turn. I mean, I had no idea what I was going to do, but that always excited me, to be honest. The best stories that I can remember are the ones that happened by accident. Then it came to me. Flash mob! I shouted at the top of my voice and started the great Los Del Rio song, Hey Macarena. 1, 2, 3, 4, I cried, my hands above my head clapping. Then I started the words. And the people on the street stopped to work out what the fuck was happening and turned to see me singing and doing the godforsaken dance in the middle of the street, surrounded by my latex-clad friends. Come on, everybody, join in! Della tua cappuccino Macarena, hey Macarena. It was working. The populace of the street was hooked and the Macarena was breaking out all over the road. The crowd was singing as they did it and it was spreading like, well, the Macarena through a gay audience, to be honest. I kept clapping and singing as more and more folk joined in. Then it got to a critical mass as the crowd took over from me in the direction of the song. People were coming out of the bars to join in, the mass happening. Macarena turning over lama, something else mustachio. Se dos amigos. The vampires, far too cool to do anything as unhip as the Macarena, were swept up in the dance, being repulsed and distressed by the awful, lovely, uncool happening. They had not even noticed me go. I had shrunk down and gone. I ran the street in my man form. I was looking for somewhere to hide, although I had no idea if I could hide from these things. I knew that they could travel fast, but didn't they know how fast that they could travel? I mean, I don't know. I ran by a hall with the Great Phil, spiritualist, up on the advertising hoarding. There was a small line outside which I circumvented to run through the large double doors and past the ticket salesperson, giving them £20 and moving on to the hall itself to try and hide in the darkness of the crowd. The Great Phil was already on stage and greeting and meeting the audience as they sat down. He was obviously a local celeb and his public knew him well. I moved towards the stage and took an empty seat just off the third row and sunk low into my chair to try and fit into the crowd, which is quite difficult as it seemed to be primarily women middle-aged and above. Eventually the lights dropped and the music started, the curtains closed and the crowd was brought to a pregnant hush. Through the millennia, mediums have contacted those that have passed before us onto the ethereal plane. The ability to speak to the loved ones we have lost has brought calm, peace and sense of joy to those that need to talk, both in this world and the next. Please put your hands together for the greatest medium this side of the Pennines, the Great Phil. The intro was done by a very camp northerner who turned out to be Phil himself once we began to hear him speak. The music crackled through the crappiest of sound systems and the curtains now opened to the Great Phil standing at the left of stage, ready to begin his show. He walked to stage centre under rapturous applause from the excited crowd and took some time to roll his shirt sleeves up. This was a developed system to get the crowd to clap themselves out and get his seance silent sentiment set. He smiled, making feigned eye contact with the members of the crowd and pointed at one or two of the regulars that he saw. Tonight, we come together to meet those that have gone on before us, those that have passed, yet still wish to get in contact with those that need to hear these words. There are no guarantees that I will hear from your loved ones. They must have a reason, unfinished business, or I need to speak to give them peace. Please give me some time to prepare and reach out to those that wish to speak. The Great Phil then closed his eyes and started humming and pressed his hands to his eyes. I began to get distracted by him. He was a good showman and my ADHD had called me on, from the threat of the vamps to seeing what the fuck was going to happen here right now. I actually sat up in my seat to see where this would go. He hummed and shook as though getting into some kind of mental state. He then suddenly opened his eyes and screamed in shock. Ah! His whole body shook as he looked around the hall and he fell back into a chair, covered his ears and closed his eyes, taking a little of a fetal position in his chair. The audience went into mass confusion. They were obviously not used to the Great Phil reacting like this, and the crowd's voices were lifted in concern and confusion. Slowly, he calmed and shook in his seat. He rocked back and forth in silence for a while, and then the crowd fell back into silence once more. All were waiting to see where this would go. The man on stage turned to the crowd. He held his head in his hands, and the shock and tears were apparent in his eyes. The man was terrified. His voice, once strong and full of vigour, was now tried and stressed. This suddenly entranced Fenemy. I have a room full of souls here today. They are all here for one reason: to protest their deaths, he announced, eyes glistening and tears running. I glanced around like many of the audience, wanting to see these torn souls. Sadly, I couldn't. It was apparent I did not have the gift. There are men, women, and children here, all torn from life before they should have been called. He leant his forehead into his hand, rocking back and forth to take a moment before continuing. This was getting so interesting. The room was full of tortured souls. I like the idea of the room being full of tortured souls. Let's see what the tortured souls have to say. I have a man here before me. One of the crowd, he's talking to me about a monster that killed him, a beast, a wolf. No, a wolf man. Many agree with him. Killed by a wolf man. They were killed, murdered by a werewolf. Now the crowd was a little confused as to what was happening. This was not how these nights went. Phil would talk to Auntie Doreen, who would tell you how much she loved you, and that she was happy where she was, and that you should not worry and carry on with life. Phil had obviously lost his mind, and we all knew he liked to drink and a bit of other stuff, but this was going too far. Again, Phil leant forward in his seat, his hands covering his eyes, rocking back and forth, and silence again slowly fell once more in the audience. He now looked up and looked around the room. Where are you? Where are you, you monster? You killed all these people. All these people are here. My God, how could you? Now some people were frightened and some were confused. Some thought that this was Phil taking the show to the next level. His eyes searched the crowd and he met mine. He stopped and, although petrified, pointed a shaking finger in my direction. Who knew that the great Phil was honest? I really wish I could have seen all those dead souls. I might be able to count them to see how many I'd actually killed. Were they all mine? Mine alone? Do you mean, were most of them mine, or were they all mine and Fenn's, or were they Fenn's and his humans in the past? Or I had so many questions. You! He shout whispered. Now a shout whisper being a definite thing. He then slumped into his seat and broke down while the crowd went from silence into group hysteria. Gasps, screams and panic filled the hall. Bodies started to move and they started to leave. And at this point I should have moved on, and then the fucking vampires entered the fray. For fuck's sake, they spoil everything. That's part 1 of more vampire nonsense. I'll carry it on next week. Hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe, and share it with your friends if you think that's something they'd like. And apart from that, have a good day. Bye bye.